My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 42 years old. And 6 months ago, I thought I had built the perfect life. A successful career, a beautiful wife, a home people envied. I thought I understood loyalty. I thought I understood love. But what I discovered wasn't just infidelity. It was a betrayal that connected 2 marriages, and it would end with a night that destroyed 4 lives forever. The irony? That night began with me taking another man's wife, my wife's lover's wife, to the most exclusive party in New York City. But before I get there, you need to understand how the facade of my perfect life came crashing down. I grew up in Pittsburgh, raised by a single mom who worked double shifts as a nurse. Nothing came easy. I clawed my way through college, through endless internships, until I built Mercer and Stone Capital, a private equity firm worth over $40 million. Money wasn't just security, it was proof I had made it. Proof I wasn't the poor kid anymore. 10 years ago, at a black tie fundraiser in Manhattan, I met Elena. She was 30 then, radiant, ambitious, with a smile that made the entire room lean closer. She worked as a luxury event planner, the type who could make millionaires part with their money and thank her for the privilege. When she laughed at my clumsy attempt at humor that night, I felt like I'd won the lottery twice. 2 years later, we were married at the Plaza Hotel. Our wedding was featured in Town and Country magazine. Elena looked like royalty in her designer gown, and I looked like the man who had it all. For nearly a decade, life was a dream. We traveled through Europe twice a year, owned a glass-walled penthouse overlooking Central Park, and hosted dinners where senators and CEOs sat at our table. Her event business thrived. My firm expanded into tech and biotech ventures. From the outside, we were enviable, untouchable. But perfection, I've learned, is often just a mask. The cracks began last spring. Elena started working later, claiming last-minute client emergencies. She joined a new gym across town, insisted on buying expensive athletic wear, and developed a sudden interest in lingerie that I never once saw her wear for me. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. That's what betrayal does. It makes you gaslight yourself. I wanted to believe her stories about demanding clients and impossible vendors. I wanted to believe the woman I married still loved me. Then came the night everything changed. I was supposed to be in San Francisco, finalizing an investment deal. The meeting was postponed, so I flew home early, planning to surprise Elena with dinner at 11 Madison Park, her favorite. When I walked into our penthouse, the apartment was silent. Elena was in the shower. And there, on the marble kitchen counter, was her phone, buzzing with a name that made my blood run cold. Richard Hale, the CEO of Hale Global Developments. A man I'd shaken hands with at countless fundraisers. Married. Older, silver-haired. With the effortless arrogance of someone who always gets what he wants. His wife, Claire, was someone I'd spoken to at charity events. She was warm, graceful, the kind of woman who made everyone feel seen. The phone lit up again. A preview flashed on the screen. Can't wait to see you tonight. Same sweet as always. My chest tightened. My hand shook. 11 years of marriage, and this is what it came down to, a text message on a glowing screen. I could have stormed into the bathroom, demanded answers right then. But rage gave way to something colder. Something sharper. I didn't build an empire by reacting emotionally. I built it by collecting information, moving strategically, and striking when no one expected it. This would be no different. I put the phone back exactly where I found it, walked silently to my study, and picked up the phone. "Raymond Cole," I said when the line connected. "I need your services again." Cole wasn't just any investigator. He was a former NYPD detective turned private investigator, the man I used for due diligence before multi-million-dollar deals. If there was dirt, Cole could find it. "What's the situation?" he asked. "My wife. I need surveillance. Where she goes, who she meets, how long it's been happening. I want everything." There was a pause. "Daniel, are you sure you want to go down this road?" "I've never been more sure in my life." "Start tonight. The Renaissance Hotel. Suite number will be in her messages. Get photos, video, financial records. If she's been planning this, I want to know every detail." By the time Elena came downstairs, dressed in a black silk dress with diamonds at her ears. I was sitting in my study with a book open in my lap, pretending to read. She gasped softly. "Daniel, you're home? I thought you were in San Francisco." Meeting got pushed, I said casually. "You look incredible. Big night?" Her smile flickered just for a moment before she composed herself. "Client dinner. You know how demanding these brides can be." I kissed her cheek, and as I did, I smelled it. Not my cologne, a man's. She pulled away quickly. "Don't wait up, darling. This one might run late." I smiled. "Of course. Good luck tonight." The door clicked shut behind her, and in that moment, everything changed. I stared at the family photo on my desk, Elena and me at our 5th anniversary, smiling like we owned the world. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Cole. "Target acquired. Renaissance Hotel. We're in position." I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, sat back in my leather chair, and began planning the destruction of my wife's double life. Because this wasn't just going to end with divorce. This was going to end with exposure, with consequences. And it would begin with her lover's wife, Claire Hale. The following morning, Cole sent me the first file. I opened the email on my laptop, coffee in hand, my office blinds drawn against the New York skyline. What I saw made the coffee turn to acid in my throat. There was Elena, stepping into the Renaissance Hotel. Her arm brushed against Richard Hale's as he led her toward the elevator. Another photo showed them kissing in the parking garage, her hands gripping his shoulders like a woman possessed. The timestamp stretched back 8 months. Different hotels, different nights. The meticulous pattern of a woman who'd perfected her lies. And then, the final detail, the hotel bills were all charged to a corporate account under Hale Global Developments. Meaning not only was he betraying his wife, but he was doing it on company money. I closed the laptop, the rage in my chest simmering into something icy. It wasn't just about Elena anymore. It was about Richard too. About the arrogance of 2 people who thought they could betray the people who trusted them most and walk away unscathed. But what caught my attention wasn't them. It was her, Claire Hale. Her name kept echoing in my mind. I remembered the last gala we attended, how she'd worn emerald green and stood a little apart from the crowd. Richard barely glanced her way all evening. She smiled when people approached, gracious and warm, but there was loneliness in her eyes. And I thought, if Elena is lying to me, Richard must be lying to her. She deserves the truth as much as I do. 2 days later, I called Cole. "Can you get me her schedule?" "Claire Hale," he asked. "Yes. I need to know where she is. When she's alone. And I need to speak to her directly." There was a pause. "Daniel, this is dangerous territory. You sure about involving her?" "I'm not involving her," I replied. "I'm giving her the chance to see what's real. And then we'll decide, together, how to handle this." Cole sighed. "Fine, but don't expect it to be simple. That woman is insulated. Private drivers, security at the building, charities she attends with her husband. She's not exactly approachable. Find me a way," I said. "I'll do the rest." It was a week before the opportunity presented itself. Claire was scheduled to attend a children's literacy fundraiser at the Morgan Library. Alone. No Richard. I arrived early, dressed in a dark suit, my expression neutral. The library's grand marble steps were crowded with photographers, their flashes firing at every arriving guest. When Claire stepped out of her town car, the cameras lit her up like fireworks. She was stunning in a navy gown, her hair swept elegantly back, but her eyes carried the weight of someone holding her world together by a thread. As she entered the library, I slipped inside after her, bypassing the crowd and heading toward the quieter exhibit halls. That's where I found her, standing alone before a glass case of rare manuscripts. "Mrs. Hale," I said softly. She turned, polite but cautious. "Yes, my name is Daniel Mercer. We've met briefly before, at the St. Regis fundraiser last fall." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "Yes, of course. You're in finance, aren't you?" "Private equity," I said. Then, lowering my voice, "I wouldn't approach you like this if it weren't important. But there's something you need to see. Something about your husband." And about mine. Her smile faltered. Excuse me. I handed her a sealed envelope. Inside were the photographs Cole had taken Richard and Elena, arm in arm, lips locked in hotel corridors. Her hand trembled as she pulled out the first photo. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She turned to the second, the third, her face draining of color with each one. No, she whispered. No, this can't be. I wish it weren't true, I said quietly. But it's been going on for months. And I thought you deserved to know. Tears welled in her eyes. She clutched the envelope to her chest, her body rigid with shock. For a moment, I thought she might collapse. I'm so sorry, I said. I know this is a lot. But I couldn't stand by and let them keep lying to us both. She inhaled sharply, trying to steady herself. When she spoke again, her voice was brittle. Why are you telling me this? What do you want from me? I met her gaze. The truth. And maybe an ally. Because I don't intend to let them get away with this. And I think you don't either. She stared at me, her breathing uneven. Then, slowly, she nodded. Not here, she whispered. Not tonight. But tomorrow. Lunch. I need to hear everything you know. The next afternoon, we met at a quiet French bistro in Soho. Claire arrived in a gray coat, sunglasses shielding her eyes, her posture stiff with resolve. I laid out everything Cole had uncovered, dates, photos, receipts. As I spoke, her hand tightened around her glass of water. I knew something was wrong, she murmured finally. Richard hasn't looked at me in months. Always traveling. Always working late. I told myself it was just stress. That he still loved me. Her voice broke. She covered her mouth, shaking her head. I leaned forward. Claire, listen to me. None of this is your fault. They chose this. They chose to lie, to betray, to treat us like we were blind. She lowered her hand, her eyes blazing now. So, what do you want to do? That was the moment everything crystallized. I want to expose them, I said. Not just to us, but to everyone. Their friends. Their colleagues. Their world. I want them to feel the humiliation they've made us feel. And I can't do it alone. Her lips curved into the faintest, most dangerous smile I'd ever seen. You're right, she said. We'll do it together. That night, as I walked back into my penthouse, Elena greeted me with a bright smile and a glass of wine, as though nothing were wrong. She kissed my cheek, told me about her meeting, and curled up on the sofa with her laptop. I kissed her back, my expression calm. But in my chest, I carried a secret she had no idea about. She thought she was in control. She thought her lies were safe. But now I had her lover's wife at my side. And together, we were going to burn their perfect little world to the ground. Claire Hale was not the kind of woman who acted rashly. Over the next week, we met in secret, dimly lit cafes, quiet corners of libraries, long walks through Central Park where our words were drowned out by the sound of traffic. At first, she was cautious, hesitant to even let herself believe the scope of Richard's betrayal. But each photo, each receipt, each timestamp chipped away at her denial until only anger remained. Do you understand what this means for me? She whispered one evening, her voice trembling as she stirred untouched tea. Our entire social circle is built on the image of Richard and me. The Hales are a brand. If this gets out, I'll be humiliated. I leaned forward. No, Claire. If this gets out, they'll be humiliated. You'll be free. And people will know exactly who the victims are, you and me. She searched my face, her green eyes full of questions. Then she nodded slowly, resolve hardening in her expression. Fine, she said. Then let's destroy them properly. Our first step was information. Cole continued digging into Richard Hale's business. By day, Richard was a celebrated developer, building glass towers across Manhattan. By night, he was bleeding money through shell companies and offshore accounts. Cole discovered falsified reports, hidden loans, and whispers of SEC investigations that hadn't yet gone public. When I showed Claire the files, her face went pale. If this is true. It is, I said. And when it comes to light, Richard won't just lose his reputation. He'll lose everything. She exhaled, leaning back in her chair. So the question is, how do we expose them? I let the silence linger, letting her come to the conclusion herself. Publicly, she whispered finally, "We have to make it public. A moment they can't escape. Where everyone sees." I smiled grimly. Exactly. The opportunity came in the form of an invitation. The New York Philharmonic Winter Gala, the kind of glittering, high-profile event where the city's elite gathered under chandeliers and flashbulbs. Richard and Elena would be there. Of course they would. These were their people, their stage. And now it would be ours. Claire studied the invitation over dinner at my apartment, her hands steady, her jaw set. If we walk in together, it will raise questions immediately. Elena won't know how to respond. Neither will Richard. And once they're off balance, then we strike, I finished. But there was more. Something deeper gnawed at me. Revenge wasn't just about humiliation. It was about truth. About consequences. And Richard's financial crimes were the kind of consequences that carried handcuffs. Which is why Cole was already in touch with a federal contact. If we timed this right, Richard wouldn't just lose face in front of New York's social elite. He'd lose his freedom. As the plan took shape, I started to notice something I hadn't expected. Claire and I spent hours together, late-night strategy sessions, quiet moments of shared grief, laughter that slipped out despite the heaviness of it all. She had a sharp wit, a warmth she rarely showed in public, and a resilience that surprised me. One night, as we sat overlooking the East River, she admitted something I hadn't anticipated. "You know the worst part?" she said softly. "It's not that Richard cheated. It's that I let myself disappear in this marriage." I stopped being Claire. I became Mrs. Richard Hale. A title, a shadow. I turned toward her, my voice low. "Then maybe this isn't just about revenge. Maybe it's about becoming yourself again." She smiled faintly, eyes glistening in the city lights. "And what about you, Daniel? Who are you after all this?" I didn't answer, because the truth was I didn't know yet. The night of the gala arrived cold and clear, the city glittering like a diamond outside my penthouse windows. Claire and I prepared separately, her stylist arriving in secrecy, my tuxedo tailored to perfection. When the car pulled up to her building, she stepped out in a gown of deep crimson silk that seemed to silence the very street around us. "You're sure about this?" I asked as I opened the car door. Her lips curved into a smile, equal parts grace and steel. I've never been more sure of anything. The moment we entered Lincoln Center, the room shifted. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. Flashbulbs fired as photographers caught sight of Claire Hale on my arm. "Isn't that Richard's wife?" I heard someone whisper. "And Daniel Mercer?" "Together." Perfect. Exactly as planned. Richard spotted us first, standing near the champagne bar with Elena at his side. His confident grin dissolved into confusion, then panic. Elena's face drained of color, her glass trembling in her hand. "Showtime," Claire murmured. We walked directly toward them, each step deliberate. By the time we reached them, a small circle of curious onlookers had already formed. "Daniel," Elena said, her voice tight, brittle. "What a surprise." I smiled thinly. "Elena, Richard, you remember my wife, of course. Or should I say, your lover's wife." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Richard's jaw tightened, his eyes darting desperately between me and Claire. Claire leaned forward, her voice smooth as silk. "Don't look so shocked, darling. Did you really think your secrets would stay buried forever?" Elena's hand tightened around Richard's arm. "This isn't the place." "Oh, but it is," I cut in. My voice carried, deliberate, just loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Because for months, the two of you have been betraying us. Sneaking around like cowards. Smiling to our faces while lying behind our backs." The murmurs swelled, the circle widening. Eyes locked on Richard and Elena, watching their perfect facade unravel in real time. Claire straightened, her posture regal. "And betrayal has consequences. Don't you agree, Richard?" His face was crimson, his lips pressed into a thin line. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "Baseless accusations." But before he could finish, I pulled out my phone. With one tap, the screen behind the orchestra stage lit up. The first image appeared. Elena and Richard, stepping into the Renaissance Hotel. Then another. Then another. Each photo sharper, clearer, undeniable. Gasps filled the hall. A few people clapped nervously, unsure if it was some sort of performance. Elena covered her mouth, tears streaking down her face. Richard turned ashen, his hand gripping the edge of the bar like it was the only thing keeping him standing. And then I delivered the final blow. These photos are only part of the story. Richard Hale isn't just unfaithful. He's a criminal. Hale Global Developments has been propped up by falsified documents, hidden debt, and embezzlement from his investors. And as of this moment, I gestured toward the entrance, where a team of federal agents stepped into the glittering hall. The law has finally caught up with him. The crowd erupted into chaos. Cameras flashed wildly as agents approached Richard, who stumbled backward, shouting, "This is insane. You can't do this." But they could. And they did. As handcuffs clicked around Richard Hale's wrists, Elena collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Claire stood tall beside me, her chin lifted, her expression unshakable. And I realized we just lit the match that would burn their world to ashes. The gala descended into pandemonium. Whispers became shouts, gasps became questions, and soon the entire Philharmonic Hall buzzed with scandal. The once elegant event, with its champagne flutes and string quartet, had transformed into a circus of flashing cameras and frantic voices. And in the center of it all, Richard Hale, cuffed, furious, his empire crumbling under crystal chandeliers. Elena clung to him, mascara streaking down her face, pleading with the agents. "Please, this is a mistake. He hasn't done anything wrong." The lead agent spoke firmly. "Ma'am, please step aside. This is a federal investigation." Richard twisted toward me as they hauled him away, his voice raw with rage. "Mercer, this isn't over. You hear me? This isn't." But his words were cut off as they shoved him toward the exit, his cries drowned by the swell of onlookers. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. My heart pounded with a cocktail of triumph and something else, something heavier. For months, I had dreamed of this moment, of watching him brought to his knees. And yet, as the reality unfolded, I felt the weight of it pressing against my chest. Claire's hand brushed against mine, steady and reassuring. "It's over," she whispered. "You did it." "No," I murmured, my eyes still fixed on Elena, trembling and broken in her seat. "We did it." The aftermath was immediate. Within hours, news outlets exploded with the story. Billionaire Richard Hale arrested at Philharmonic Gala, cheating scandal and financial crimes exposed. Photos of his arrest circulated like wildfire across social media. Elena's tear-streaked face appeared on gossip blogs, her designer gown labeled "The Look of Betrayal." By the next morning, Richard Hale was on every front page in America. And I? For the first time in months, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the husband in the shadows. I was the man who had revealed the truth. But revenge has a strange aftertaste. That morning, I sat in my apartment, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. The city looked the same, cars honking, taxis weaving, the endless thrum of life. But inside me, something had shifted. I thought of Elena's face as the photos appeared on the screen. The way her world had shattered in an instant. She had betrayed me, yes, but in that moment, she wasn't the powerful, untouchable woman I'd known. She was small, fragile, human, and a part of me wondered, had I gone too far? Claire, however, had no such doubts. She arrived at my apartment that afternoon, radiant even without makeup, her hair pulled back casually. She tossed a folded newspaper on my table. The headline screamed, "Socialite Claire Hale stands tall amid husband's scandal." "You see," she said, pouring herself a glass of water, "we didn't just expose them. We took control of the story. People see us as the betrayed ones, the survivors, not the victims. That's power, Daniel." I studied her. There was fire in her now, a kind of fierce energy I hadn't seen before. The timid woman who once whispered in cafes had vanished. In her place stood someone bolder, sharper. "You've changed," I said quietly. She met my gaze without flinching. "No, I've just remembered who I really am." 2 days later, Richard was officially charged with wire fraud, securities fraud, and embezzlement. Bail was denied. He was staying behind bars until trial. Elena tried to disappear, but New York society has long memories and sharp tongues. She was uninvited from luncheons, cut off from galas, her name whispered with pity and scorn. Her friends abandoned her in droves, unwilling to be tainted by scandal. Still, she tried. On the third night after the gala, she appeared at my door. Her eyes were red, her clothes disheveled, her once perfect image shattered. "Daniel," she whispered, "please, we need to talk." I hesitated, then stepped aside. She walked in, trembling. "You don't understand. Richard, he wasn't just cheating. He used me, Daniel. I didn't know about the money. I swear I didn't. I studied her, searching for sincerity. Once, I would have believed her without hesitation. But now? 8 months, I said flatly. 8 months of lies, Elena. Hotel rooms. Business trips. Whispered phone calls at midnight. Don't tell me you didn't know what you were doing." Tears streamed down her face. "I loved him. I thought he loved me. But he was lying to me too. About everything." She reached for my hand. "We can fix this. You and me. We can move past it." I pulled my hand away. "No, Elena. We can't. Actions have consequences. And you made your choice." Her face crumpled. She turned, stumbling toward the door, pausing only to look back one last time. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And then she was gone. For weeks, the city buzzed with the fallout. Richard's empire collapsed piece by piece, investors fleeing, buildings seized, lawsuits piling up. Elena vanished to some quiet suburb, her social reign reduced to ash. Meanwhile, Claire and I, we stepped into the light. We attended events together, this time not as pawns in someone else's game, but as allies. Rumors swirled, whispers of a romance between the betrayed spouses. Neither of us confirmed nor denied. Let them speculate. Let them talk. One evening, as we left a charity dinner, reporters shouted questions. "Claire, Daniel, are you two together now?" She smiled, slipping her hand into mine. "What do you think?" The cameras flashed wildly. Headlines were written before we even got home, and for once, I didn't care. Because maybe they were right. And yet, late at night, when the city was quiet and the adrenaline had faded, I'd find myself staring at the ceiling, asking the question I hadn't dared voice. Had revenge set me free, or had it chained me to the very thing I wanted to escape? Because Richard Hale was gone. Elena was gone. Their lies were over. But the taste of betrayal still lingered. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't finished. 6 months later, the courtroom was packed. Richard Hale stood at the defense table in a gray suit that somehow made him look smaller, weaker. The once mighty billionaire, now shackled by his own arrogance, waited for sentencing. I sat in the gallery beside Claire. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but reporters filled the hallway beyond. The world had already convicted him. Now it was official. The judge's voice rang out. "Richard Hale, for wire fraud, securities fraud, and embezzlement. This court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison." Gasps echoed. Richard swayed as if struck. Elena, seated 2 rows behind him, let out a strangled sob. The bailiff led him away, his eyes darting around the courtroom until they found mine. For a heartbeat, the old fire burned there, anger, defiance, hatred. But it flickered out just as quickly, replaced by something I never thought I'd see in him. Fear. And then he was gone. After the sentencing, Elena caught me in the corridor. Her hair was tied back, her designer wardrobe replaced with something plain, almost drab. She looked older, thinner, as though the scandal had eaten away at her. "Daniel," she said softly, almost pleading, "I don't expect forgiveness. But I need you to know I never wanted it to end like this. Not for you. Not for me." I studied her, searching for any trace of the woman I'd once loved. But all I saw was a stranger. "Elena," I said quietly, "you wanted a life of power, of status. You gambled everything for it. And you lost." Tears welled in her eyes. "I lost you," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, You gave me up long before Richard Hale ever entered the picture. For a moment, I thought she might collapse. But instead, she straightened, gave me a faint nod, and walked away. The sound of her heels echoed against the marble floors, fading into silence. That was the last time I ever saw her. Life has a strange way of filling the void. In the months that followed, I poured myself into work, into rebuilding not just my career, but my sense of self. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by what someone else had done to me. Claire was never far from my side. She, too, had reinvented herself. No longer the socialite in the background of her husband's empire, she launched a consultancy firm, advising businesses on governance and ethics, her own quiet rebellion against the lies she'd lived through. And then, one evening, we found ourselves back at the Philharmonic. A new gala, a new year. The same glittering chandeliers, the same champagne and gowns. But everything was different now. This time, we weren't walking in as wounded spouses, hiding scars behind polite smiles. We were walking in together, hand in hand, unashamed. Deja vu. Claire teased as we entered the grand hall. I smiled, hopefully without the FBI this time. She laughed, and the sound was light, genuine. A sound I'd come to crave. As the music swelled and the crowd sparkled around us, I realized something. Revenge had given me closure, but it hadn't given me peace. Peace came later, in the quiet moments, Claire's laugh, the steady rhythm of rebuilding, the decision to live instead of merely survive. Still, I'd be lying if I said I had no regrets. Late at night, sometimes I'd remember Elena's face in the ballroom when the photos appeared. The shock, the humiliation, the raw devastation. And a voice deep inside would whisper, was there another way? But another voice always answered louder. She chose her path. Richard chose his. And I chose mine. Revenge hadn't healed me, but it had freed me. And freedom, that was enough. A year later, Claire and I stood together again at the Four Seasons Hotel. But this time, it wasn't for a gala. It was for her company's 5-year plan launch. Investors, entrepreneurs, young professionals, people who still believed in building, in creating, in doing better. As I watched her command the room with grace and confidence, I felt something stir in me. Not the sharp edge of vengeance, not the hollow ache of betrayal, but something warmer, something hopeful. When she caught my eye across the room, she smiled, and I realized the truth. Betrayal had broken me. Revenge had rebuilt me. But love, the right kind of love, was what carried me forward. After the speeches, after the applause, Claire joined me on the balcony overlooking the city. The skyline shimmered, the same as it always had, indifferent to the rise and fall of those who lived beneath it. You ever think about the beginning? She asked softly. About how all of this started? All the time, I admitted. And I thought about Richard's smirk, Elena's lies, the nights I spent drowning in suspicion and anger. I thought about the gala, the courtroom, the headlines. And then I thought about where I was now, standing beside her, stronger than I'd ever been. And I said, I think betrayal was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and the best. She tilted her head, curious. The best? Because without it, I said, taking her hand, I never would have found this. Found you. Found myself again. She squeezed my hand, her eyes glistening. Then maybe it was worth it. For the first time in years, I truly believed it. The city hummed below us. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but alive. And I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't the man defined by betrayal anymore. I was the man who had faced it, survived it, and chosen to build something better.